for organizing this, right?
Yeah.
So, Safe Harbor, do you want me to go through this, or we should
Uh,
go ahead?
sure. So
All
again, thank you everyone for joining us for the Guwahati and Mumbai MuleSoft meetup. So we are for the first time we are coming together to co-host the meetup, and thank you so much, Joe, for accepting my invite and coming over here for the amazing discussion on hyperautomation. And before we start, some safe harbor statements. So both the speaker and host are organizing this meetup in individual capacity only. We are not representing our companies here. This presentation is strictly for learning purpose only. Organizer or presenter do not hold any responsibility. That same solution will work for your business requirement. This presentation is not meant for any promotional activities. Some housekeeping. So we are recording for session. The recording will be available in the Meetup page within 24 hours. You all have mic access. Please feel free to ask any question. It's your time. You're giving time to this meetup. Please feel free to utilize that. And once the meetup is done, you will get a feedback form. Please fill that up so that suggest us what different topic you want next time and how we can improve. So talking to about the organizers. So as I said, we are co-hosting Guwahati and Mumbai meetup group. So we have Jitendra Bafna and Migesh from Mumbai, and myself from Guwahati. So I know like Jitendra doesn't need any introduction. Okay, he's all over MuleSoft with a lot of blogs and videos. Likewise, Megesh is doing wonders in Composer and Salesforce, and I'm leader for Guwahati and Lucknow. So I'm just keeping the introduction for us. Over to you, Joe. All yours
Right.
now.
Thank you for the privilege. So, just to introduce myself, I am Joey Chan. I'm a proud husband and father to 6-year-old and 4-year-old girls. I'm also the founder of and technical architect at Cloud Jedi Solutions. We've actually been rated in the App Exchange before as number one. And I'm not sure if you're familiar with the Salesforce MVP, but it's basically the equivalent of MuleSoft Ambassador for the Salesforce ecosystem. So currently, there's actually four of us that has both Salesforce MVP and MuleSoft Ambassador. Some of you may know Gaurav Kotarpal, so he's one of those. And then I'm also 34 times Salesforce and MuleSoft certified architect. I'm also representing the well-architected ambassador for Salesforce. And for those that are familiar with Dreamin events, similar to Mule Dreamin, I'm also the organizer for the Philippines Dreamin and Southeast Asia Dreamin. With that, let's start. So the agenda for today is really talking about understanding what is hyperautomation. Why would you want even to care about it, right? And what are the different Salesforce and MuleSoft solutions? How it's meant to work together and how you can learn more. And along with this, we'll be discussing what is it good for and what is it not meant to be used for. All right. So first question is, what is hyperautomation? So it's actually a business-driven discipline approach. Take note, it's not a specific product. It's more of a discipline. It's more of a concept. It's something that can be applied across the different parts of an organization. So in this case, it's actually used for rapidly identifying, vetting, and automating as many business and IT processes as possible. So think about processes that used to take a lot of time. It could be something that requires quite a lot of paperwork. It could be things dealing with things like older systems. And at the same time, how do we empower the business to be able to do things themselves without always talking to IT, right? So it's actually what we call the orchestrated use of different products. So right now we have ChatGPT, AI, so all of the capabilities around that in terms of artificial intelligence, right? We also have machine learning. For at least for our purposes, we'll be talking about the AI, event-driven software architecture. So a good example of this is using MuleSoft, right? And talking about RPA. For those that are not aware, RPA stands for Robotic Process Automation. When we think about robots, we're not thinking about the physical robots that you will see in factories or industrial application. Here, we're talking about software robots that are meant to automate a certain process, things that people used to do manually. All right. And then we'll also be tackling some low code and no code tools, right? One of the biggest problems that we have right now is that we have so much systems right now, and there's so much demands from IT. But the thing is, uh, like for example, in this graph, they only have so much delivery capacity. It's not really feasible for us to actually keep on hiring and keep on growing to keep up with the pace with the business demands, all of the automation requests, all of the new things about AI, right? And all of the different SaaS applications. For example, a company could have what, tens, 20, 50 different systems that you need to connect to. Question is, how do we solve that problem? There's only so much delivery capacity that they have. It's not really feasible for us to keep on hiring more people, or to keep outsourcing it, right? The question here is, how do we actually empower the people that actually fully understands the business process, and how we can give them capabilities whether or not they have technical knowledge to be able to do things themselves. So based on statistics, we have 82% of businesses that they need easy access to data and IT capabilities. In many cases, the bottleneck would be the IT, wherein, okay, there's this simple request, and it could, they, let's say the business would have to wait weeks, if not months, in order to gain that access. And only 37% of organizations say they have the technology and skills to keep pace. That's actually where we'll be talking about the different products to help with this, right? And more importantly, why should you even care? I'm assuming that since this is a MuleSoft meetup, many of you are either MuleSoft developers or MuleSoft architects, whether platform or integration architect, right? The key part is here is, how do we help companies improve productivity? And more importantly, how do we help the business deliver value faster? It can be in the form of saving costs, or it can be in the form of getting more revenue. And at least for each one of you here in the audience is, how can you actually leverage this knowledge in order to move you forward in your careers? I'm pretty sure you're already quite familiar with the different capabilities of MuleSoft, Anypoint platform. We won't necessarily be digging too deep here, but really understanding what are these products built for and who is it for. All right. So first question is, anybody here familiar with Salesforce flows? I guess feel free to unmute yourself. We'll try to make this interactive. Anyone? So quite a number of you are already familiar because Salesforce acquired MuleSoft many years ago, right? So the main automation nowadays for Salesforce is really Salesforce flows. It used to be that you can only build using workflow rules or Apex triggers. And then there came Process Builder. And nowadays, both Process Builder and workflow rules are actually somewhat deprecated. So you cannot create new ones anymore. And soon enough, they will no longer be supported. Salesforce is really the main tool for automating processes within Salesforce. The big part of it is understanding that, for example, whenever you need to create a certain business process, this is something that even business focused folks, non-technical folks, can actually do and implement. So similar to the Anypoint Studio, a lot of it is really just drag and drop, right? So for example, you have this triangle here indicating that a decision needs to be made. And then the key part here is there are multiple different automation capabilities. You could, for example, have something that's scheduled depending on a certain condition you want to run something. Or you could also trigger a certain automation based upon certain events. Like, for example, whenever a new record is created in Salesforce, do something about it. It could be as easy as updating a certain field. It could be updating a separate object or separate record, or even creating new records, sending emails, sending Slack messages. Those are some of the capabilities of using flows. And this actually is something that you could use, something that most people wouldn't necessarily use MuleSoft for is something, for example, if you need to build a wizard, for example, imagine something like an onboarding process or application form. Say, imagine you have 5 pages of different um, things that you need to ask a customer. For example, application for, let's say, entering a university. First part is you need to ask for basic information like the name, the email, and any other details. And then page two, educational background. Page three, any other supporting documents, and so on and so forth, right? So this is actually one of the powers of Salesforce flows, is being able to create those declaratively, meaning you don't necessarily need to have developer skills per se, but it, of course, it really helps a lot if you have a developer background, mainly because it's what we call visual programming. So you're technically already programming things, right? So you have certain conditions, you have loops, you have what we call DML, so query operations. You can do query, insert, create, update, all of those. And then for the next part is Composer. So one of the biggest reasons why MuleSoft Composer was created is really solving that delivery gap, right? The question is, how do we empower people that understand the business for them to be able to create automations themselves? So this is actually something like a screenshot of what Composer is. I'll be able to have some time for a quick demo of what we can do with Composer. We won't go too deep here. At the same time, I just wanted to show you how easy or fast it is to be able to create a simple integration between Salesforce and Slack. So take note that MuleSoft Composer, you could think about it as something like um, a really simplified version of the endpoint platform, wherein you're basically telling it, okay, I want this to happen when this event runs. And based on conditions like scheduled jobs. So, for example, every day I want this specific process to run. And there's actually around 30 standard connectors already. And then for cases when, take note, this is outdated. So we have connectors for Salesforce, NetSuite, Jira, Marketing Cloud. And a big part of it is really understanding that this notice that we have different business tools here, right? For example, being able to send an SMS or call using Twilio. You also have capabilities to, for example, for the Gmail to be able to get emails there. For example, creating calendar events using Google Mail, or even creating or reading data from Google Sheets, right? So a big part of it is understanding that we want to be able to lessen the load on IT, and we want to be able to help the business folks to be able to create themselves, right? It could be an end user that's creating many of these automation, or it could be a Salesforce admin, right? Because in the past, normally, whenever you need to create an integration, something simple, you actually need to have a developer to be able to do that. Or for bigger organizations, they may be using MuleSoft Anypoint platform, right? But at the same time, what are the things that we can lessen the load on the developers? And in this case, there's no coding experience required. All of it is drag and drop. If you're familiar with how you create flows within the Anypoint platform, it's somewhat similar. You just have to tell it, okay, I want a scheduler, these are the conditions, and I want these things to happen. And it's all point and click. And then the big part of it is understanding who is it for, right? In this case, so it's also empowering the Salesforce administrators in terms of understanding that, hey, they now have the capability to be able to create integrations themselves. No longer is a time when they would need, or at least tell their boss that, hey, I won't be able to do this. We need to hire a Salesforce developer or some other developer to be able to build this integration. And for Salesforce architects, we are actually empowering them, as we have another tool in our arsenal now in terms of being able to integrate different products, right? Because if you think about it, there are a lot of integrations that make sense to build on the endpoint platform. But there are also one-off instances wherein it doesn't really make sense for the business to invest so much on the endpoint platform, and they just want a simple integration. And this is what it can do. And then for Salesforce developers, we used to build a lot of Apex code in order to integrate systems for point-to-point, because not all companies can actually afford um, MuleSoft before, right? So we'll see how the new pricing structure of MuleSoft can help with that, because it was only launched this year. I'm really hoping that more and more companies adopt that. But at the same time, in the past, we really had to hand code most of the point-to-point integrations. So understanding this is something that can help them. Hey, we can actually use Composer to do this integration. Even Salesforce marketers, they can actually use it to trigger certain events based on what's happening in, for example, Marketing Cloud, because we have connectors for it. And for Salesforce consultants, really understanding that, same with the Salesforce admins, they can actually build the integrations themselves. All right. Feel free to interrupt me if you have any questions. All right. So next is, what if there's no API? You, in your experience, I'm sure there are already systems that you've encountered wherein it's really old, there's no existing API. How do we get data out of it, right? So that's where MuleSoft RPA comes from. So in a way, if we need to create certain automations for those old systems that doesn't have an API, we won't go too deep into what RPA can do, but just to give you an idea. So this is a screenshot of RPA Builder. So this, in a way, is what we have in terms of um, identifying the business process. So this is the start, this is the end, and these are the different steps that an RPA process would do. In this specific example, it's as simple as going to a website, finding the username and password. For example, looking for that username, and then finding the next input text here. We using a tab, entering the username, finding the password, setting the password, and then logging in, finding a specific page to get the details, and then finish it. So you'll notice there's still, it's quite interesting how there are still systems, legacy system, that need something like this simply because they don't have an API. But MuleSoft RPA is actually one way in terms of unlocking data out of those really old systems. Because part of what MuleSoft RPA can do is being able to go in and simulate what a human user would normally do. For example, in the past, it could be, for example, for a bank, someone will have to go through a really old screen terminal. Sometimes it's even black and white without, it's literally a console where they have to type things. So it's interesting how it's already 2024 and there's still quite a number of those type of systems. Question is, how do we automate that process? By using MuleSoft RPA, you can actually build a bot to be able to do that operation in, let's say, a VM. It's recommended to use a VM for that. So what you could do is you can build that bot, have it connected uh, with MuleSoft endpoint platform, and it actually becomes an API in itself. So imagine this. Let's say you have your own APIs built using either endpoint, and there's a certain process there that needs to use RPA. So you can simply call that API and the bot would run. And then once it's done, it would respond back with a response. So it's quite interesting how these are unlocking the data from really old systems. MuleSoft RPA is really more geared towards UI-based automation. So if there's a certain process that needs to be read, for example, if you're dealing with, let's say, PDF files, it's one way to be able to get data out of it. And along with being able to, for example, read data, and then, for example, if you need something more sophisticated, you could use services like Amazon Text Extract to be able to do a much deeper analysis of the data to be able to get that in, for example, JSON format. And this is also a great way to be able to interact with these applications. Okay, I want you to be able to open this in Excel file, do something, save it, put it into something else. So there's so much automation capabilities here that is really unlocking. Those, the ones traditionally needed to be done by a human. And take note, of course, with anything that's using OCR, using things that are not necessarily accurate, it also has capabilities in terms of being able to have a branch to allow a human to be able to validate it first. So those are some of the capabilities of RPA. The question is, what is not a good use case for, right? A very important consideration is if we already have an API, we shouldn't be using RPA. So there are actually some use cases, for example, okay, right now there's no API. We have to build it using MuleSoft RPA. We build it, right? But the thing is, as soon as we get an API for that specific product, we should be planning on how to use that API and getting rid of the implementation for the bot. Because, of course, API is a lot more reliable, right? And there's so many things that could change or could go wrong with RPA. I'd say this is not going to be your first choice in most cases if you're dealing with another system. But if there's no other choice, then this is something that would help you unlock that data. All right. For Anypoint platform, basically all of the things that you can't do with Composer and integration, more complex integration. If you need a lot of performance, you need something that needs a lot of memory, really heavy processing millions of records. This is the best tool for the job. Take note, the pricing for MuleSoft Composer, even though, yes, it can scale to millions of records in terms of processing, it may not be the best tool for the job. I can talk about that later, but basically, when you subscribe to the Composer, you basically get credits that you can use for the whole year. And whenever you're creating automation within Composer, that's actually consuming those credits. I'll be talking about that later, right? So now the question is, why is it an automation suite? The thing is, if you're talking about each of these products individually, I'd say they're not that great. Um, the power here is really being able to use each of these products along with each other. So, for example, many of you have created different APIs on the Anypoint platform, right? And a key thing here is, okay, let's say you've created 50 or 100 different APIs. Whenever you have that, the thing is, let's say there's a request from the business, I want to get this certain data point. Normally, the MuleSoft developers would get involved to then build something to be able to push that over to Salesforce, for example. But with this specific automation suite, the business people or the Salesforce admins can actually read what's in the Anypoint platform and be able to consume those APIs. That's actually where the power comes in. Meaning using MuleSoft Composer, it can take them, 5, 10, 20 minutes to be able to easily build a simple integration to get data out of the different APIs that you have in Anypoint platform. And at the same time, Composer can also access MuleSoft RPA. So for example, there's a process that involves 3 different systems. One is a legacy system, but because we already built a bot there and that's exposed in the endpoint, we can actually get the data from the RPA within Composer, all without any developer knowledge. So in a way, it's really targeted towards the business to be able to help them be empowered in terms of getting the data that they need. Because as a best practice for the endpoint, you really want to have the API-led automation, right? We want to be able to create more APIs for more people to leverage rather than recreating things. Any questions so far? None yet? All right. So, like I mentioned earlier, how are these meant to work together, right? So here we have MuleSoft Composer, and it has different connectors with existing systems, right? You have Google, Salesforce. One of the use cases for Salesforce is actually, for MuleSoft, is being able to do what we call a Salesforce to Salesforce. In certain organizations, they actually have more than one org in Salesforce. I've heard Google, for example, has a few hundred different Salesforce orgs. And sometimes that's actually a strategy if you need compliance for certain business roles. So it could be one per country, for example, because they need data residency, all of the different compliance requirements. So you have multiple orgs. The question is, how do you then aggregate all of those? So depending on the data sets, or let's say if you want to send a certain record based on a certain criteria to another org, you could use MuleSoft Composer for that. But key thing to take note, if you have a large data set, MuleSoft Composer may not be the best tool for the job because it's going to consume one credit for that. So there's actually a computation in terms of how you can understand how many credits you're using per composer task. But key part here is how MuleSoft Composer can use HTTP requests to the RPA manager to be able to run RPA bots. And this bot can then get data from legacy systems, unlocking data from there. And then the RPA processes can also get data from COBOL, old system, SAP. So, but of course, for SAP, ideally, you should be using APIs there. And then we also have things on the endpoint exchange, right? So you'll have the RPA as another API that either Composer, even RPA, or other Mule applications can then use to leverage. And then the big part is the next step. All of these are actually combined within the Salesforce ecosystem. So, for example, I mentioned Salesforce flows earlier, right? It's how Salesforce admins or consultants can easily create processes within Salesforce. And being able to import all of the different APIs from any point is something that's a key value driver. Traditionally, you need to work with a developer to be able to get data out of different APIs. Nowadays, these are all being exposed for admins to be able to create integrations themselves. So, okay, I need to understand, for example, looking at the endpoint exchange, I can see that we have these, how many APIs, let's say 30, and then I want to get data out of this specific API. I can then use that within the flow. This is the power of the MuleSoft automation. It's, if you're simply looking at one of these products in itself, it may not necessarily be the best tool for the job. But you have to look at it as a whole, along with both the MuleSoft and Salesforce capabilities. And this is just a quick video. Let me just make sure I could share the audio here. Hold on. Let me share my screen again.
Yeah. Meanwhile, anyone have any question? Are we good with everything? Yep. Thanks.
Can you hear it?
Yeah.
I'll play this quickly, all right?
Yeah.
Today, every experience you create for customers, employees, and partners requires data and orchestration across all of your
So this is actually a sample of a composer. I'll go through a sample
systems.
later.
What if everyone could unlock data, automate processes, and create experiences that wow your customers? MuleSoft is the how behind the wow. Let's start with automation. Automation is so much more than bots and workflows. It's about freeing up time for employees to focus on higher value work. For business teams that need to automate processes using clicks, not code, there is MuleSoft Composer. It comes with out-of-the-box connectors to systems like Salesforce, NetSuite, Tableau, Slack, and more. Plus, it's built right into Salesforce. But what about automating those legacy and hard-to-reach systems that don't have APIs? MuleSoft RPA uses the power of bots to automate any UI interaction, capture data from documents, and take action in any system. Next, with MuleSoft, you can unlock and integrate data from any system to drive connected experiences. With MuleSoft Anypoint Platform, a unified solution for APIs and integration, IT teams can securely connect data from any system, whether it lives in the cloud or in legacy on-premises systems. Plus, with built-in monitoring and management, you can have a single pane of glass into the status of your integrations and APIs, with customizable dashboards and easy-to-use alerts. And finally, we make it possible for you to deliver business outcomes faster. We've built a marketplace of plug-and-play connectors, templates, and accelerators so you can leverage industry best practices and get started today. With MuleSoft, you can automate anything and empower everyone. To learn more about transforming your business with MuleSoft, visit us online.
All right, please stop. So that's just a quick background of what Salesforce or MuleSoft automation can do. And a key part of here is something that's suddenly great news for everyone, is that it's really hard to get access to both Composer and MuleSoft RPA. One thing that I'm sure you would get access to is that if some of you have access to this, especially for ambassadors, but in general, for those that can have their employers sponsor them, you could go for this specific ADX 350 in terms of class. So it's just not cheap. It's actually quite expensive. But at the same time, some companies are really willing to invest here. This is one way you could actually get access to the org and some training materials in terms of how you can build all of these flows using Composer, using RPA, using the different products actually contained within the Hyperautomation certificate. And take note, there's also this Hyperautomation trail mix, but the biggest challenge is that, let me share my screen again. Share the whole screen. The biggest challenge here is that, yes, you can definitely read and understand the theory, but unless you get access to a specific instance, it's going to be very hard for you to really learn and absorb these. One big thing, it's not really an endorsement, but something that you could consider, although it's not free, is that one of the MuleSoft ambassadors, Diane Kessler, actually has a company integration quest. What they did is they actually bought a subscription from MuleSoft for the automation package, and they're actually offering access to that for training and learning purposes. So if this is because normally the list price there is, for example, let me just quickly check automation. If you were to buy it, let's see. I wasn't sure if they still have the pricing here. They no longer pricing. Looks like they no longer have it. It's at least around $50,000 per year. So they basically bought an instance and then offering this for the community to be able to learn. So this is, I believe, the only way, apart from being a partner and being part of a class. So those are the only three ways that I know of in order to get access to RPA and Composer. So with that, I'll be talking about the MuleSoft certified hyperautomation specialist. I guess whom of you already have this or at least planning to? I know, for example, we have some ambassadors here that has it, right? I guess Megesh, is that right? Do you have it? Have you
No,
taken?
not
Not yet.
apparently, but I'm planning this year.
I see. Are you planning to do it this year?
Yeah.
All right. Since you're planning to do that, I actually highly recommend that you go through that class if you have the time. So just schedule it, right? And
Yeah.
then for the rest, some of you are probably going to be interested here. The big challenge here is the number of products that this involves. So if we're going through this specific trail mix in terms of hyper automation, there's quite a lot of interesting things here. And coming from many of you would be MuleSoft developers or architects, right? One thing I noticed within the ecosystem is that if you're a MuleSoft developer and you're working for SI, once you're a MuleSoft developer, you're basically going up that path, right? MuleSoft developer, you'd be an architect, platform architect, or integration architect. And in most cases, it's going to be quite rare for you to move to the other side, which is the Salesforce side of things. But the challenge here is that this specific product, or at least certification, deals with both Salesforce and MuleSoft products. So, for example, if we're looking at the different topics, so this one, something you can learn, for example, the RPA, the different design patterns, how you use RPA in any point, right, in Composer. A big part of it is actually understanding when to use what and how are these meant to work together. So you can think about this more like an architecture type in a way that this is what an architect would think about in terms of how to design a hyper automation solution. And this also talks about what Composer can do, what are the different capabilities. But honestly, you could learn a lot of the technicalities of Composer, even though you may not have access to the actual Composer instance because you already have a lot of experience on MuleSoft endpoint platform. So that deals with these two products, right? And RPA, I believe, is going to be new to most people unless you're experienced in other RPA platforms like UiPath, Blue Prism. There are others there that's, I would say, quite popular and quite mature. So unless you have experience there, this is going to be new to everyone. There's quite a lot of power and intricacies in terms of how to deal with RPA because by its nature, you're basically doing quite a lot of screen scraping, understanding what page it is, different possible changes, especially, for example, if you're automating something that has a web page. As soon as they make a small change, something could break. And this talks about how RPA automation can then be linked to MuleSoft Composer. And Design Automate is something that many of you are probably not going to be aware of. What are the different capabilities of Salesforce flows? And big part of it is understanding Einstein chatbot. For those that are not aware, think about a typical chatbot that you see in your lower right. And along with the intelligence or at least the capability to be able to get data in and out of Salesforce. For example, you're in a certain website and there's a problem with a certain product. If you're logged in, it knows you. You have your email address. It knows the products you've purchased. It can then query Salesforce. Okay, you purchased this product, let's say June 2023, and I noticed that let's say if it's June 30, so it's still within the warranty period. So it can do a lot of the different things that it can offer because it's still within the warranty period. So things like that, it's really unlocking all of the different data that you have within Salesforce. And all of those are really drag and drop. You don't necessarily need to have developer knowledge to be able to build all of those different things. And this, I would say, probably going to be the easiest for you is understanding the endpoint platform, what are different capabilities, when and why you should use these certain products, and API manager, the endpoint exchange. This part is also something that's probably new to you, some of you. This so as orchestration is, I would say, an add-on. To be quite frank, I haven't really seen that many companies yet that's really leveraging this, because take note, this is an add-on, so you need to pay for each run for the full orchestration. There's actually a freemium model, so for certain a number of runs it's free, but after that you need to subscribe to an additional add-on to be able to get this. And what is this for? Flow orchestration is really meant for processes that need to be handled by more than one person. So it could be, for example, okay, a certain process that needs to go through the marketing department, to be going through the sales department, but basically any process that needs to go through multiple different steps. This is one way to do it. All right. And then how can you learn more? So there's these two official composer and RPA groups that I'd recommend if you're already digging deeper into these different products. And of course, you'd see Makesh really active here. So if you have any questions, you'll see either Andrew Shanks or him here. So quick shout out for you. And then also for RPA, take note, I'd say it's still evolving quite a lot, but we do have an active community here for those that are doing things, and this is the place where you could ask questions. And more importantly, this is actually where some of the product managers are looking into. So if you need help, this is the right place to ask those. And of course, we also have the MuleSoft community Slack for those that are not yet part of it. So that's where you could ask questions. Anything else? Any questions before we try to go for a quick demo?
Joey, here's a question. So we got to know that MuleSoft has released a new product called IDP. Is it part of the Hyperautomation certification as well as the entire automation package?
For the certification, I don't think it is yet for now. But as far as I know, yes, it is part of the MuleSoft automation package. Actually, we can quickly check, but I don't think they're going to update the certification that fast because it just got released recently, right? I doubt that it's going to be part of it.
Until and unless they rename the product.
Mhm. Let's see. Actually, we can quickly check. By now, you'd be aware of the different capabilities, right? And many of you are probably aware already that things have already moved to web assessor in terms of taking exams. I say personally, from my experience, I've taken both Salesforce and MuleSoft exams. Um, I'd say it's a lot easier to go through the web assessor in terms of process. Normally, whenever you're taking a MuleSoft exam remotely, the person would need to look into literally all sides of your room, right? And even under your desk or all sides. But it's a lot easier for web assessor. Any other questions?
Yeah, I have one point, Joy. Like as you are going to show some of the demo, but
Mhm.
you talked about the trail mix, so trail mix course and trailhead course. So, like for this, if anyone want to do hands-on, so this is a desktop tool which is working only on Windows, right? Uh,
The RBE, yes, correct.
yes, it
It
should be
is
on Windows,
only
and there are some prerequisites. So for hands-on, it need to have some special org. capabilities or some prerequisites for that?
Are you talking about Composer or the
Yeah,
RPA?
the RPA.
For the RPA, I'd say you really need to get an instance there. So the thing is, I'm not even sure. I don't think you can actually even download the RPA builder without getting access to the account. So yes, it's only going to run on Windows, although I've actually tried it on a Mac, but it's actually using the x86 architecture. So anything that's using M1, M2, M3, it's not going to work. I've tried it. So what I do is actually have an older machine that's running on a Mac, and I'm actually using Parallels for it. So I'm running it virtually there. So that's a lot faster for me since I'm used to using Mac, and being able to use the shortcuts within Mac makes it easier for me to build things there.
Sure, thank you.
Mhm. But just a quick answer for you. In most cases, if we're talking about deploying it in production instances, it's actually recommended that you put it into a VM, because at that point you can also control that. Okay, I only want to have a certain screen resolution. I only want it to have a certain font. It's interesting how you need to turn off certain features within Windows. For example, something about the fonts, something that makes it easier for humans to read, but harder for computers to read that. So you need to turn that off. And there's several other things, best practices that you need to do in order to make the environment of where RPA needs to run something more consistent. So, for example, being able to run certain opening of browsers always in incognito window. That way, you don't have cookies or any other session details that will interfere with that process. All right. So for today, I'll be going through a quick demo of Composer. So can you still see my screen? Yes. I'll go ahead and close all these. So this is actually a sample of what we have. So I believe there's still currently two types of MuleSoft Composer. One type is actually something that's embedded within Salesforce. The second type is something that's standalone. I currently don't have access to the standalone version, but more or less what you'd see at the middle is going to be quite similar. It's just on a different domain. And right now, um, MuleSoft Composer is actually running on Cloud Hub 2.0. So whenever a company buys MuleSoft Composer, they would get one instance tied directly to their production instance. So unlike the endpoint, unlike Salesforce, there is no concept of a sandbox or a test environment here. You literally only have one instance. Why do we have that? That's literally because they wanted to make it as easy as possible for users. So there's no concept of DevOps here. So just same thing to keep in mind. But at the same time, of course, you should be able to test your flows, right? So it allows you to connect to sandbox environments. And it's just that whenever you need to switch, you'd have to manually go in and switch those connections over to the production environment. So that's how it's being done. And we have different capabilities. For example, we have built-in templates. So these are out-of-the-box flows that you can easily leverage. But take note, it's not yet possible to create new ones. Let me check what's happening. I wonder what's up here. Could not be processed. Let me try again. Something wrong with Composer. Let me try creating a new one. Hopefully this doesn't break. Let me log out. Hold on, let me check what's happening. Let me log in again.
Yeah. Meanwhile, Joe is trying with that. Anyone have any questions on RPA? Anything on the certifications or the hands-on demo? Any questions on that? Maybe you can put it on chat, or you can feel free to unmute and ask that question over here. Or anything apart from this, so we can utilize this time.
Yep, let me see. Looks like it's still not working. I'm not really sure what happened. It worked 2-3 hours ago. So let's see. Might not be a good timing here. This is a test environment, so
Yeah. No, it's like whenever we try to show a demo, one or the other thing fails.
yep.
It's a rule.
But anyway, you know, it's really something really simplified version of what we have. So it's refusing to connect. I wonder what's up here. There might be something wrong. Could not be processed at this time. Hmm. Is that today? Looks like we got a really good timing here. Seems to be a maintenance happening right now. So I don't think we can do a demo right now. So what I could do is I could send a link of another presentation that I gave for a different group, just so that you can see how it's being done. So that if you need to see more information about the capabilities, you'd be able to understand that. I can share that with you after this, Abhishek. That way,
Sure,
at least you can.
sure, Joe.
Yep.
Is that okay one? If you want, I can share that link over here.
Let me find that. Hold on. Let me look for that.
Sure.
This one's a lot more detailed. So let me send it via chat. So it's just bad timing. I think there's some maintenance service interruption happening literally right now. Looks like that's why. Up to
No
five
worries.
hours.
No worries, Joe. So you can copy that and
Mhm.
you can
So
go through
yep,
that.
feel free to watch that. More or less what we went through is something similar. So I presented this one in the US. So something worth looking into. This is more for the architects, what to consider. All right. Any other questions? Hopefully, it's been useful. We're really just going through it on a really high level, mainly because it takes a while. I literally went through this like on a 5-day course, and it's really just scratching the surface. So for those that have the privilege of being able to go through that class, I'd highly recommend that. So
That's amazing, Joe. Thank you so much for sharing your expertise over here and guiding all of us on the use of RPA, hyperautomation, or how we can do the certifications, the learning goals. Thank you so much for that. So we are open for question. Anyone have any question? Feel free to ask, maybe on this topic or any other topic you are facing up with, and we are happy to discuss.